Hi guys. So this lecture is to walk you guys through the second half, or the first half of Act 2 of Death of a Salesman. And this section is really leading towards sort of the climax and then the resolution and the denouement of the conflict that we've seen developing with Willie, not only with himself, but with the people around him. His sons, his wife, even Charlie and Bernard. So as we start reading Act 2, you'll notice there's a shift in tone that's reflected in the actual stage direction. So the morning has this sort of bright, happy music. The sort of darkness of the night is fading away. And then we see this shift in tone and actions between the characters that sort of creates this new feeling of hope. So Willie and Linda are having breakfast, and they start by talking about how things are changing. So the boys are off because they're going to go have their big business pitch, and Willie's going to the office to demand that he no longer has to travel. And you see he talks about bringing, on the way home, he says, maybe I'll buy some seeds. And seeds, of course, can be representative, can be a metaphorical representation of planting new hope, new beliefs, new systems, and kind of believing in a new start. And it seems like this is what's going to happen. So you'll notice that Willie's still ignoring everything Linda says. She's always there with him. She's trying to get him to put on the jacket. He's walking out of the jacket. She's chasing him, and he doesn't really notice her until he's leaving. And they start talking about the costs of everything, and he can't understand why everything is so expensive. Why can't he ever just get ahead of the bills? Why can't he ever just get things that work? And you get the impression either that, he's too cheap to invest in things that maybe are affordable, but that will last, or you get the impression that he doesn't understand what things cost. Linda seems to be the one that has the running list of what everything costs and what needs to be fixed and how much everything is, and you see that she's actually the one who's running the house. She's the one who's actually managing the household and the costs and everything else. So the more and more you start to see that Linda is one really the glue holding kind of this family together. And on the way out the door, Willie stops and he sees she's still darning the stocking. And remember, the stocking is a symbol of guilt, essentially, for him, because the stockings is what the other woman that he gifts her and gives her when he's traveling and he's cheating on Linda. So he demands again that she stops mending the stockings. He says, it gets me nervous. I can't tell you, please. So again, he's making it about himself, but really it's his own guilt manifesting through the symbol of the stocking. And she quietly hides the stocking and walks him out the door. So we move to a scene. We see that Linda has a brief phone call with Biff, and she got all excited because she saw that the hose was gone. She was going to go take it away, and she saw the hose gone, and she thought maybe that Willie took it out, and that was a symbol that he was okay again. And then Biff tells her that he actually took it off. And so she kind of loses a little bit of hope there, but she's still excited for the changes that could be coming because of the men in her life. And then we move to Willie and his boss, Howard. So Howard is obviously the son of the former owner of the company, and it's clear that the old man has passed away a few years ago, and that's when Willie was everything changed for Willie. He was placed on commission only and traveling nonstop, and you meet this man, Howard, and he's a young man, obviously. He has a family, and he's more obsessed with this recording dictaphone tool that he has than he is talking to his own employees. So we clearly see a representation of sort of machine over humanity, and sort of the automation that's happening during the 1940s into the 50s, and how that's replacing people at their jobs. And there's a real fear of this, and that's being manifested here that we see. So he's more interested in looking at the machine than he is looking at his own people. And they have a conversation, essentially, where Willie says, I don't want to travel anymore. And he basically says, "I'm sorry, you have to. I can't find a spot for you on the floor. There's just no way that we could have you here." And Willie keeps lowering his price. He says, "I just need 65 a week." And he says, "I just need 50 a week. I just need 40 a week to put food on the table." Howard is kind of dismissive. He doesn't see Willie as something valuable. He doesn't see him as anything to be invested in. And for him, it's a dollars and cents matter. And Willie tries to invoke this emotional connection with him that's so important to Willie, that people see him or perceive him in a certain way, or that everything is built on this idea of loyalty or connections. And it's not like that anymore, not in this new world. And Willie says, "God knows, Howard, I never asked a favor of any man, but I was with the firm when your father used to carry you in here in his arms." So he's trying to kind of play on his emotions, and it doesn't work. Howard really and truly can only, as he says, business is business. He can't see past that. So Willie tells him a story all about Ben and how he used to want to travel, and he talks about this man that he knew, this salesman, who was able to sell from his own living room in his slippers, picked up a phone and sold all day long and made a fortune. And he died, as he said, the death of a salesman. So for him, he has an image in his mind of what the death of a salesman looks like. And it's something that's filled with honor, something that's filled with pride, something that's filled with riches and fortune. And all the salesmen came and were lamenting him. And for him, for Willie, this is the image that he has in his head. The sad truth is, as we know, is this is not going to be the death of a salesman that Willie is facing. He's facing being alone, being destitute, not being able to pay his bills for his wife or leave his sons anything. And so we get this ironic understanding of what it is to be a salesman here. And Howard keeps calling him kid, and he says, "Kid, I can't take blood from a stone." And it's really demeaning in a way that he's talking to an older man who's been with the company for 30 plus years, who literally held him in his arms. And Willie basically begs him, and he says, I'm talking about your father. He says, the man he's describing is his father, and how could you do that? And these promises, he says, a man is not a piece of fruit. He's not an orange to throw with a peel away. So he's saying, I'm a human being. See me as a human being. Treat me like a human being. Don't treat me like a dollar sign. And that is exactly what Howard sees him as. And that's what this new commercial economy is all about. It's about churning out money and profit and objects, essentially, versus people and connections and this old guard understanding of what it is to be a salesman and to make those connections with people. So he gets mad, and he basically have an altercation almost, and basically Willie realizes he's getting fired because Howard leaves and comes back in. He says, "Willie, we don't want you to go to Boston anymore." He says, "No, I'll go." And so he's desperate, and he realizes he's getting fired. And so we go into a sort of fading. Now the stress level has reached a point. We get another flashback, and we see Ben come back, and they're having another conversation about going off to Alaska. And you see that Linda's there, and she basically says, "Don't try to sway him. He's got a job. He's happy. He's good." And Willie at one point says, "It's not. It's all about opportunity. It's all about who you know." He says, "It's contacts, Ben. It's contacts. It's all about like making these connections with people." And you see this fade into him going into Charlie's office. So Charlie and his son Bernard is there visiting him, and Willie's talking out loud to Ben, who isn't there. So the secretary comes in, and she tries to get Bernard, who's in Charlie's office, his dad's office, and says, "Come out, he's really bothering me, I can't do my typing." And you realize that Willie's having an episode where he's imagining someone is there. And they have a conversation, and they talk about basically what happened to Biff all those years ago. And if you remember, Bernard was the little wimp who was supposed to be, following in Biff's footsteps everywhere, trying to help him cheat on math tests because he was the nerd and Biff was the jock and everything else. And you see that Bernard is now a very well-established, comfortable man. He's got a family. He's clearly a lawyer. He's going to Washington on some big case. And things are really working out for Bernard. And Willie just wants to know what happened. What happened to Biff? What did he do wrong? And so they have this conversation where basically Willie starts out by, trying to build up what Biff and Happy are doing. He's like, oh, they got a big business deal going in the works. This guy called them out from the West. He needs them. He wants them. We're having a big dinner later to celebrate. And Bernard is very quiet about his success. He's like, yeah, I'm going out to see some friends. They, have a tennis court. And Willie catches this, and he keeps saying that they have their own tennis court, meaning he realizes how successful these people are, and if Bernard is hanging out with them, then he must be successful. So Willie has a moment of vulnerability with Bernard, and he says, what is the secret? What happened? And how did Biff fail? And something happened where he failed a test. He failed math, and all he had to do was go to summer school. And apparently, in Willie's mind, he begged him, he pleaded, and Biff didn't go. And then Bernard kind of sets the record straight, and he says, but he was ready to go to summer school. He was like fired up. He was going to do it. And then he went and he saw you for the summer. And something happened. And then Willie gets very defensive because something's coming back to him. And he says, what are you talking about? Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And we get an understanding that clearly Willie actually did say something that made Biff for some reason react the way he did. And Bernard says he came back and he took those sneakers that he loved, which the University of Virginia on them, where he was going to play football, and he went downstairs and he burned them, and they had a big fist fight, and he never understood why, but they had a falling out, and something changed in Biff. He just laid down and just gave up. And Willie starts to remember that something that he did, this is somehow his fault, but he won't be honest and won't say what happened. So Bernard goes off, and Charlie's the one that tells Willie that Bernard is actually going to argue a court case in front of the Supreme Court. So you see, Bernard is very humble as well, and he's not about appearance; he's about substance, and that's the difference between Willie and Biff and Bernard and Charlie. Charlie also has a very successful business, and he keeps offering Willie a job, and you see throughout this whole conversation with Willie and Charlie that he's too proud to take it. Willie won't take it, even though he's literally just been fired. He tells Charlie that he's just been fired. Instead, he'd rather borrow the money, knowing that he'll probably never pay it back. And then Charlie and him have a very interesting exchange. She says, when are you going to realize that things like that don't matter? Because Willie has been telling him how he named Howard, the boss that just fired him. He said, I named him. How could he do that to me, basically? And he says, Willie, when are you going to realize that them things don't mean anything? So remember, we have this colloquial language, which is kind of setting the stage for us, and it's very familiar between these two old friends. Even though, again, just like the relationship with Linda, this is a one-way street. You get the feeling that Charlie gets nothing out of this relationship, but he does it because he's a decent man, and he has substance. And he says, you named him Howard, but he can't sell that. That doesn't mean anything to him. You're a salesman, and the funny thing is, you don't know that. So he says, I've always tried to be liked. I've always tried to impress people. And he says, why must everybody like you? Who liked J.P. Morgan? He was a jerk, but he was rich. And he says, I just can't do it. I just can't work for you, Charlie. So at the end, they have a very interesting foreshadowing where he says, after all these years, and it's funny, you end up worth more dead than you are alive. Willie says this. And then Charlie says, Willie, nobody's worth nothing dead. Did you hear what I said? And Charlie's clearly worried about Willie, but Willie's back into his dream state now. And he says, basically, he runs out the door and he says, Charlie, apologize to Bernard for me. And you're the only friend I've got. And then he leaves and Charlie says, Jesus. So we're kind of moving the plot along. We're clearly building towards the climax here. The only thing we have left really is to see what's happening with the sons. And as we sort of build towards this sort of climax momentum here, keep in mind, of course, certain elements of the text. So make sure you're keeping in mind the symbolism of certain aspects of the text. Make sure you're keeping in mind these male-dominated relationships and how important they are. And also this idea of masculinity and what it means to be a man during this time period. And then, of course, keep in mind these ideas of industrialization and factorization and how we're losing the idea of the individual for the sake of mass production. So there's a lot of things. Of course, Willie's guilt is equally important. So keep all these in mind as you keep reading into the next section.